1943. What a Christmas. The idea of getting killed is not such a bizarre thought, being a soldier, let alone during war times, but to die because of a train, well, that's hard to stomach for an aviator. I don't have anything against trains per se, but I'm beginning to think that they have something against me. Why am I here? I know you're not wondering about that, but I'm going to tell you anyway, because it's the narrative arc, the expedient. Everything started a long time ago when I was still a child. Napoli. Bright and thunderous. The north of the city ended practically where we lived. My father, my mother, and 5 children. 2 rooms were enough, because except for my mother, we were outside most of the time. And my father was working, and we, the little ones, were at school or in the street. But not just any street, though. There was Mergellina's beach with the fish market that came to life and faded away within a few hours from the fisherman's return. And then the big green hill in front of our house. Now that was our playground. A small garden, not much cared for, but exclusive. On Sundays, we would share our kingdom with the rest of the city. The rich just recently replaced their chariots with modern convertible cars and would come down from their neighborhoods to the Gaia's coast and the communal villa. Out there, the ups and downs of their fortune was measured by the power of their engines. For us kids, this intrusion was a fun change of wind. Drivers who still wore top hats would drive fast and did not care for children playing in the street. So we had to be careful, Manachate, not to be ran over. On the other hand, as per silent agreement, nobody would be surprised at the throwing of pebbles aimed at the coachman, tall hats. If I hit it, I take it! We'd shout. And if the shot was lucky, no protest would follow. The fallen hat would become legitimate property of the able slinger. Then they decided to build the railway station. The beach disappeared to make room for the harbor the tourists from the north would use to go to fragrant Ischia or luxurious Capri. Also, our precious playground. The big green hill disappeared. Finito. For most people, trains were a mean and a chance for a new life, a more interesting life, a more eventful life. For us, kids crowded on top of one another, trapped in the ache of the size of our homes, which I still feel now today, it became necessary to find an escape, to breathe again. But we didn't figure it out right away. Now, Father was a railway man, and to him the new railway station was like a new church for a priest. Although that church would not hold mass for long. As a railway man and a socialist one, the strikes of the coming years following the First World War would be fatal. A new wind started blowing. Malicious, and subtle, which did not turn into storm. Rather, it blew ill-omened over its political opponents, firing them one by one. In the blink of an eye, trains and railways had turned us into inmates, and the head of the house, whose world collapsed, would roam every day through road construction sites, begging poorly paid jobs for too many mouths. Then the world started coming back for me again, the oldest of the males in the brood. The army could be a life-changing occasion and also a help for the rest of the troop. What can a young scamp from Mergelina know of wars and battles? The First World War was terrible. The great disabled who lived on the top floor of our building would tell me stories whenever I would go up to him in the evening to read him books by his bedside, because reading consoled him for a few hours from the shards and made him blind. It was a war made by grown men and endured only in the northern regions, in the fighting regions. Not much was going on in Napoli, and an Italian general, Diaz, signed the victory bulletin, the armistice. I was on a horse. Yes, sir. Macchia. Spot. Because he was a spotted horse. And also because you could spot him a mile away. Despite the pitfalls of barbed wire, of toxic gases, and enemy machine guns, we were able to screw them Austrians out of a few trenches. Spot always left a mark. Artillery fire and enemy war cries did not bother him. As soon as a trench was cleared, he felt like celebrating by peeing in it, like a dog marks the territory. It turns out that the smell of horse piss is very different from the smell of dog piss. So, our brothers in arms would sometimes joke, passing by, "Hey, hello, okay, this trench really hits the spot." Then, it was the time of the ditch. As we were charging the enemy trench, the enemy artillery overpowered us, and a cannon projectile hit right next to me. And Spot, stunned and on the ground, I tried to get back up, but in vain. The days were always a little dark, but I couldn't see even one light. It was when I touched here that I realized metal shards hate my eyes. I could not see anymore. "Macchia!" was the only word I could yell. And I heard a neigh. "Macchia!" I yelled and crawled, following the answering neighs until I found Spot's body. It was warm and wet. It was blood.
I lied next to him with his snout pressed up against my forehead, and we waited until the artillery stopped, until we cleared the trench, until Spot stopped breathing. I would like to know what harm they have done. I tell you, it is the vilest business to use horses in the war.
Let me ask you a question. Between a post office clerk contest and a blue pilot uniform, what would you choose? I dreamed of being an aviator destined to roam the sky, a pioneer of open spaces away from earthly coasts, from misery, and from trains. Up until that time, cavalry officers were the most admired, especially by women. But the world had changed. One day on a horse would carry them as far as a half an hour flight. Mothers, of course, who did not like to think of their flying sons, had to be reassured, so I told mine, do not worry, I will fly low. Mothers don't know that that way of flying is also the most dangerous. And so Air Force it was, and with it, the world. Orbitello's seaplanes, where you could smell the transatlantic air carried by the long-range aircraft celebrated by New York in the blaze of confetti on Fifth Avenue. What was it? When we got our pilots' licenses. The women ate us with their eyes whenever we were on leave. And Spain, when we were given a fake name because Italy fought in that Spanish Civil War, but for whom? No one could know. Finally, Berlin. I arrived as a colonel's field aide, independent from our embassy. It only took a few weeks before I became the most admired officer in the capital's reception. Berlin had transformed into a world capital, acting fearfully, the same way that the French and the Brits did for far too long, facing Hitler's bullying. You are as handsome as novelty and as arrogant as inexperience, said this one time the Duchess von Hammersche something when she was trying to steal me from her best friend's bed. Actually, I had even told Himmler to get lost. The man with the right to life and death of every German, Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS. Now my name is on a list on his desk, and if he remembers our first encounter, I'm really done for. 1940, 3 years ago, I just arrived in Berlin. What can a young scamp from Urgelina know about politics? Plus, I barely spoke a word of German. And they would send me here and there to get a lay of the land and gather intel on German preparations. One day, I was in a highway, and my car was flanked by a convoy of 3 cars, 2 escorting the one in the middle carrying some authority. They ordered us to pull over, and we did. Our driver obeyed, and turning to me, shaking and pale as a rag, he said, "Himmler, SS1! Himmler, SS1!" Understanding so little German, I could not imagine that Heinrich Himmler, the Prime Minister of Internal Affairs, the man in charge for Nazi German security, would stop people on the road like that, just like any other policeman. Maybe I should have thought of that. Maybe I was thinking about something else. But by that time, I didn't know that dictatorship was nothing but the sum of many small, measureless individual wills. Anyway, since he insisted on getting my papers, I threw my passport at him, which landed seasoned with an extremely Italian and clear "E vattene a fanculo." It means go fuck yourself. And he left. That same evening, at a reception at the Japanese embassy, we were welcomed by the delegates and by a German delegation led by Himmler himself. When my superior introduced me, he replied dryly, "Ja, I already met the captain. Suddenly, he has a nice temper." Now my name is on a list on his desk, and my fate is in his hands. I'm fucked. Rompipalle! It's because of trains that I am here in this ruggedy, musty hotel in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, waiting to know if they're going to use us for shooting practice tomorrow morning as the Gestapo agents implicitly threatened while they were interrogating us. In a few months, everything that we feared would happen, happened. The world allied and rebelled against the German barbarity, and everywhere Germans were in trouble. Italy, powered by the incompetent ego of Mussolini, who really should have stayed out from this foolish and wretched war, was pulverized and divided in two. The Germans, all the way down to Rome, and the Anglo-Americans coming from the south. The Gestapo told us that our destiny, mine and of all the other officers detached from the Italian embassy, depended on adhering or not to the Salon Republic, the puppet government that the Nazis created to bring back Mussolini once he was arrested after the fall of fascism in the glorious day of July 25th, 1943. Up until that time, we played for time, not because we weren't sure, but because that was the best way to get together to come up with a plan. Because the truth was that we took a part of Italy assembly money to prevent it from Nazi seizure and to make sure that it would go back to Italy once the war was over. So we pretended to argue over which answer to give so we could come up with a plan. No, non è possibile, io questa cosa non riesco a fare. Ma ti pare, vai tu, non vado io. No, dalla sorella sua, con la sua. Io non ce l'ho una sorella, quindi che vogliamo fare? Maybe we found a way. Allora, adesso vi dico te. Tomorrow morning, if they don't shoot us, we'll sneak it to the care of la sorella, the sister of one of our men. They should allow her to visit him, and that She's married to an Austrian businessman who can hide the money by investing it in his company. Yes, they are good people. We believe that no matter what will become of us, they will return the money to Italy as soon as the war is over. September 1943. The Italian army acknowledged the impossibility to keep going, the fight going against the overbearing Allied power, appealed to General Eisenhower, the commander-in-chief of the Allied forces, for an armistice. The appeal has been granted. Consequently, any hostile activity from Italians everywhere must cease. Goddamn trains. It'll be Christmas in 2 days. Christmas in 1943. 3 months have passed. When Radio London gave news of the armistice, we threw ourselves at the embassy to destroy the ciphers and the private documents for fear of a German retaliation, which did not take long to come by. Over the next 24 agonizing hours, first, the arrest of every relevant Italian. Finally, the decision to allow only those with diplomatic immunity to return back to Italy. Of those captured and on their way to German concentration camps, I never heard from them again. God save them. 2 trains left on the night of September 9th to meet in Munich. One with the diplomats, the German diplomats, and ours going to Milan. Differently from the trains studded with German diplomats, ours with Italian soldiers and the common man never made it back to Italy. In Munich, they deviated us on a dead track. And there, they brought us here in Garmisch-Partenkirchen in trucks under arrest. Now, see why airplanes were a different story. I wonder how my parents are doing. I haven't heard from them since I ran to Naples because our house was bombed, of course, near a train station, and brought them here in Umbria, at Castello City, where the husband of my older sister was born. Now there is nothing else that I can do. I wonder how long will it take for the Allied forces to get there? It's written with the handwriting of Bianchi la Capatosta. He's 27 just like me, but he has the spirit of a scoundrel. De internate gentes discessus eo militum carmen funerarium die legatorium ad patrios lares redditus compositus, which means the prisoner's departure, or rather, the funeral poem, written to honor the soldiers on their way to the great beyond. One day passes, another one. Never yet the one big moment. And even the smartest one is now prey of such a torment. Here they'll surely
get us now here, it's sure to end up bad. There is no hope now like before to get out of this once more. And then 20 or more verses describing everyone in the troupe. Now here's one about me. Seesawing between parties was the great and even Gigi. That's me. He thinks of days lost long ago, having his share of fun in Berlin. 20 credit cards he had back then, that's true. Without limits for the gas. He thought he was immortal. Then, now he walked to Uston, alas. That is good of Yankee to cheer us up. You know what? I am going to write a list of everything that they took from me, those damn krauts. Let's try to get something back. 1 convertible lunch.
Farà piacere un bel mazzo di rose e anche il rumore che fa il cielo fa, ma una birra fa gola di più in questo giorno appiccicoso di caucciù. Sono seduto in paracaro, questo pensiero ai miei.
Hey!
Una moto e l'altra censi.
You're a looker, right? Who is that? That son of a gun helped me up the hill on a bike. He saved my life, you know? Yeah. The one that disappeared downhill. If it weren't for him, the Nazis would have caught me on their way north. I would have been the last victim of their frontline passage. What's your name? Vincenzo? Can I call you Enzo? Good. I'm Luigi. Or you could call me Gigi. Come on! Let's go look for the Americans. They're bound to have something better than this old piece of stale bread. You are all bony, my friend. Believe me, I too have been more on the other side of hell than here in Castello City. I'll be bouncing all over for months since those crowds decided to send me to the Young Republicans at Salò. Yeah, the puppet government, instead of shooting me. And on Christmas days, 1943, the fascists took us there, me and my comrades. They kept us in jail for 2 months before interrogating us, but then it went a little better than we expected. Curses, threats, a few punches. They even faked our execution a few times. But in the end, when we stayed on point and we didn't adhere to that farce of a republic, when we confirmed in writing our oath to the people of Italy and to King Vittorio Emanuele II that we took as soldiers, well, then they had to let us go. And also because, up until that time, they had nothing on us. So we ran like the wind, my comrades and I. It was February, so I came looking for my parents here at Castello City because I haven't had any news from them since I left them there. On a train? Again, my ass! I am through with trains. I still had my uniforms, and by the time I spoke German well, so I took advantage of the Wehrmacht trucks that were coming from the north, telling them false stories of my alleged missions. Those young German boys were troopers, not the SS. Those poor devils were just as scared of the hell we fell in as we were. So they took me in without asking too many questions, and truck by truck by truck, I arrived at Castello City, where I was finally able to hug my mother again. Oh. Mamma sono tanto felice che ritorno da te. It was cold. But my parents weren't doing too badly. Not yet, at least. The front line was far away, more south. I thought it right to begin telling the story, the real story of what was happening around us. The people needed to know that the propaganda of the so-called Italian treachery of its German ally was just that, propaganda. Everyone has their story. Theirs is photographed by Bismarck's quote. Gypsies are nothing but pieces of paper. So when the Nazis ripped their agreements with their smaller confining states, attacking and subjugating them, they betrayed us too. They abandoned our expedition in Russia. They massacred our soldiers in Corfu and Cefalonia in the southeast. And finally, they invaded us, crossing the Brenner. I tell this story so that people would know of the Italian tragedy consuming us with the complicity of Mussolini. I kept silent on some things. I allowed some poetic licenses for the sake of the country. I didn't say that some of my comrades betrayed their soldier's oath. I didn't imagine that some of them, my comrades, would go even one step further, accusing me of stealing the saved embassy treasury. Luckily, the carabinieri at Castello City told us before the SS could get there It's a huge mess out here, I know, sure, but I couldn't stand being called a thief. Better dead. I absolutely had to clarify without putting any of my soldiers who remained with me in danger. They weren't wanted, like me, but I knew nothing of their fate. Only Marie, who had a family, I knew he ran to Milan, and so I went to him for counsel. At first, he tried to dissuade me, but then he said, okay, then I'll go with you. Are you nuts? I told him, you're not even wanted. And then he gave me an answer that I couldn't refuse. Maria and I had been travel mates since the times in Orbitello, way before the war. Brothers in arms and in drinks on a Saturday night. We would go out with the local pharmacist's daughters. Beautiful, but impossible. And their friends. Not as beautiful, but possible. He came from a good family, and he even had a car. Not just any car, a balilla. Faster than it spirals on the street. One time, we were coming back from the airport, and we ended up in a ditch. We didn't get hurt, but before worrying about us, we worried about the severely damaged car, which to us poor fools was more important than our own bodies. Oh, man, girl! Would you look at the fender? I said to him, and he would reply, Oi, Gabba! You nuts! The car isn't even yours! That answer, with time, became a part of our little group's vocabulary, and it was an answer that I couldn't refuse. I surrendered to friendship. And so, in our people are a weird mix. Sometimes they even feel Italian. Tricking Nazis always had an irresistible charm, even for those fascist Azzolo who let us go free for the second time. Come on! In a few months, all of Italy was occupied, and the relationship between Germans and Italians had transformed for the worst. On my way back to Castello City, I stopped by Firenze, where I got these civilian clothes, and I went to a small hotel I knew. I locked myself in the room because the hotel was full of Nazis swarming the place. That evening I heard a knock. As I opened the door, I kept my hand on my gun. Oh, thank God, and all of the saints, it was the hotel owner. He said to me, I don't know you, but it'll look more normal if you come dine down the stairs. So I go to the restaurant, which was just another room with a small counter for the dishes, and I see the owner. Hey, Mr. John, welcome back. Here's your table. I nod and follow. We haven't seen you in a while. Have you been visiting your family? He doesn't give me time to answer. Oh, that's great that the missus is so friendly. I imagine that you will return to... He names a place I don't know. At which point, he stares at me in the eye, waiting for an answer. Yes, that's exactly right, I say, following his eyes. And I will go there to the day after tomorrow. In fact, I will leave after lunch. Yeah, because of that business. So I eat, so to speak, among the soldiers. I'm a businessman. I'm dealing with German factories. At dawn, after dinner, I leave and I arrive at Castello City where everything, however, went to pieces. At the beginning of July, not many were alive left in Castello City. Only 400 people, mostly elders, women, and children. And they were refugees on a mountain in the Buon Riposo Chapel there. You can see it even from here. That was because so they could escape from the grenades and the German terror attacks, sacking houses and beating civilians. In this ocean of war-worn refugees, I was finally, once again, reunited with my parents. A few days later, the captain, commander of the German troop, ordered for the chapel to be evacuated so his command could take over. That was a monstrous request, because the people once lost in the hills would have fallen under the enemy artillery. So I thought, if fascists at Salò prove themselves as Italians before fascists, why wouldn't the Germans at Castello City show themselves as men before soldiers? So, alone, strong only by my badge and my fluent German, I went to the German commander and I asked him to revoke the order and forbid any kind of pillaging on those innocent townspeople. Would you believe it? I convinced him. 10 days from when I arrived on this hill, the Germans began their retreat and the refugees were finally able to return back to town. You know, sometimes bureaucracy can be worse than cannon fire. 2 days later, we received a phonogram saying that I was wanted again by the fascists for the same old story of the missing embassy money. There are times when we don't know why someone goes beyond their own heart. It just happens. When the SS came to town, there was a gray silence. Patrol footsteps tolled in your head, even when they were far. Only this time, we heard him approach from the square, from the street. They're knocking. The Carabiniers Marshal, a middle-aged man with wife and kids. Behind him, a German troop. He stares me dead in the eyes for a few endless seconds, and then he turns to the German troop. This is the man on the run wanted by the Italian state. For long he caused the great difficulties to ours and your troops. I, as a carabiniere, received direct orders from Rome to take him myself to the front line for the trial so he can pay for the crimes he committed against the nation. He takes me by the arms. He handcuffs me. The Germans looked as he brought me through the square and toward the town's exit. You will pay for the crimes you committed against the Italian state in front of the tribunal. This conflict does not deserve unpunished ones like you. The Germans mumbled. The Carabinieri. Sotto voce. Don't turn around. Do not look at them. Keep walking and don't make any sudden movements. One of them says something to another trooper who starts to run toward us. Keep walking and keep looking toward the exit. He gets to us. Du hast den fallen lassen! We stop. He hands something to the carabinier. It was my wallet. It fell out of my pocket. Out of any moment, that's when a German had to be nice to me. We reach the town's end. The carabinier stops. Next to a bush. And takes out a bag. He handcuffs me and says, Capitano, I am alone in this town, and so I cannot take you where you need to go. You too are a man of service. You do your duty. Thus, on this old piece of metal, I started pedaling toward the hills, soon followed by the Germans, who surely understood that we tricked them. And I would have been caught if it weren't for that devil on a bicycle. And so, you know that devil on a bicycle looks a lot like gold medalist Bartali? Anyway, you and I, Frank, we're saved. How? Maybe I'll tell the story one day. Great stories feed on great ideals. Sometimes even too great. But even we got some ideas from all of this. Power easily forgets about people. It always happens. But when it turns into fierce and inhuman will, there will be always a young scamp from Mergellina to say, if I hit it, I take it. And if the hat falls, no protests.
There is even less for me.
There is even less for the piano.
Francesco Andolfi. And I think Janice should also join.
Janice. Janice Orlandi.
How are you doing?
I'm alive.
Still a voice?
I do. Good. This is, yeah, I'm surprised myself.
Janice, join us here, please.
Thank you.
Very informal. We're seated on the stage.
Lovely.
So I'm going to use my privilege as director and ask the first question, and they're done talking. Take your time. And so it's about the genesis of this play. I understand this is based on the memories of your grandfather. So I was wondering, who collected these memories physically? Who wrote them down? Did you record something? Did you find letters? And then who physically wrote the play?
So, as you could see from, like, the uniform belonged to my grandfather. You might have noticed that the grades on the sleeves were about here, but that's because he was a good head shorter than me. So when I did the fixes, yeah. So that's one. The picture of the guy on the plane, on the poster, the last one you see there, that was him in Orlandi on the planes that would go on the water. So it started all with stories that he would tell my father, and then eventually us, but we were very young, of all of this. And after a while, when we were starting to look into their possessions, after those grandparents both passed away, we found letters, the list that I mentioned, which was twice as long as the one that I did. He really wrote it. He got nothing back, but he was hoping to get it, because that's, they call it like a cima napoletana. It's the Napolitan grit. So those lists, a letter from the town of Castello City, from the mayor, thanking him for saving the people when he did that thing, when he went to the German troop and did that whole thing. And so we took everything that was tangible through the documents, and my father wrote a subject, his son. And then we wrote it together, and then I adapted it into this one-minute show, and I did it. So it's this little...
And Janice, tell us what's your, because this seems like a very, very intimate history. It's a beautiful story, and what I love is how the text combines the dramatic, the heroic, and the picaresque. There is also this element of the Napolitanness that comes out with irony and with a sort of a smile, it's a bittersweet smile. But it's like your grandfather, the father, and then Francesco, and then you come in. So what's your contribution as a stage director to stage something like this, to bring it out of a family dimension and make it appealing and interesting for larger audience?
We worked together for a number of weeks on looking at one of the first challenges was to bring it from to work with the language a little bit so that it was more. It was originally like an Italian translation into English, and I tried to create it more like it was.
Conversation.
And we worked together on that and explored that. And during that process, Francesco had lots of images, and so we worked with what the images were and then how to heighten the images. So we looked for the images of the Italian soldiers, we looked for images of the, I said, we need to have a picture of Mergelina. You know, he had a postcard. I said, no, let's blow that up and put it. So we found in the process, we kept working with more and more image life to bring about to tell the story through the images, as well as the characters. We worked a lot on the characters, creating, you know, the commedia style, you know, hotel owner, and we did a physical work for.
I love the Duchess. Is she a Duchess in Berlin?
The Bond or something,
Yes.
yeah.
Great.
So
That's also verifiable.
So we worked a lot with how to create those characters so they would pop out and help elevate the storytelling. And and the map of Italy what became an important part of it, and we kept finding props and new ideas, meaning the cigarettes, the bicycle thing. What happened one night, I said, let's use a chair, just turn it upside down. So we kept finding things in rehearsal that that allowed us to enhance the storytelling with very little. I mean, Francesco's a really brave actor, and he really, he worked really hard to bring it to life.
You know, the first time he approached me to bring something here, tell the audience what it was.
Well, it was 2012.
Yeah, and
Jesus Christ. It was Prometheus Bound by Aeschylus.
he just arrived and he came to me and said, I would like to do Prometheus Bound with a bunch of my friends. Are you sure? They did it. So now it's in your own words, a story that is beautiful, it's intimate, and it's also relevant. What is next for these players?
Well, Thursday we're going to go to Stony Brook University, guests of Professor Mignone of the Department of Italian Studies there. And
Because it's an anniversary, right? It's an anniversary of
70th year of the Italian Constitution.
the
Yeah.
Italian
Yes.
Constitution, so it's an important time.
So we're going to, we added a little introduction. It's nothing detailed. It was more to find a parallel for between these events and the first 4 articles of the Italian Constitution. So we're going to do it there, and then there's going to be a full production in Rome.
In Italian?
In Italian in Rome, where we're probably going to have a real bike. It's just for the sake of-
Yeah,
I mean,
we use chairs.
but
But I love the inventive.
Yeah.
You have a bike, you use a chair, set up.
it helps. It helps.
Beautiful.
And then next year we're going to come back here. We're going to probably do another run at Still Adler Studio,
And
and
we're
then
looking to bring it to the Players
The
Club.
Players
I'm a
Club.
member of the
Wonderful.
Players Club in Gramercy Park.
Yeah,
We're bringing
yeah.
it there. And to explore what to do with it, maybe bring it into a festival.
people told us that like when they read the story, it's the material for the Call of Cell, Spielberg-style adventures of this guy that has this odyssey throughout things. And there are not that many about Italian soldiers during World War II, as far as I'm aware. But well, who knows?
I think
What could happen.
through the individual story of his grandfather, I learned so much about Italian history during that time and how difficult it was for the Italians and how the country was torn. I just found it really moving to like.
Any questions? Yes.
So in doing this, obviously you grow up, you hear some of these stories from your family. How much did you learn anything new about your grandfather doing this? Is there anything that came up that you didn't know? Or
Well,
didn't
the
hear?
specificity of the grit of a Napolitan, because that is something I have to now. When I go to Rome, I will have to stay more than 1 weekend in Naples to understand what that means, because I came here.
How hard are you going to play the Napolitan accent? I'm sorry.
Because the same thing goes for my father. He speaks without an accent in Italian, but he gets mad in Napolitan.
Okay.
So when the moment when you have to accentuate something there, that has to be.
Okay.
Yeah. So those little parentheses, but it was
Well, you can go back to the question.
Yeah.
Anything else new that you?
It was, well, I mean, I didn't know that he was such a player, really. I had no, I saw pictures on the mantle, but you
How
don't.
old were you when your grandfather died?
It was 12.
Okay.
12. But one of the funny things is actually, yeah, he went through this the same age that I have now. Well, he was 27, I'm 28, but that was the age, this was the age
That he lived through this.
that he lived through. And so, yeah, I can only imagine myself putting myself through that and all the nothings, because there were this, he didn't root for Mussolini, he didn't want to be in the war, it was a chance for the family, as it says at the beginning.
and he's like, I am doing something for my family. I'm doing the right thing, and on top of that, I get this slap on the ass and this slap on the back of my head. So at the end of the whole thing, I am gonna make sure I get something back. He didn't, but he tried. And those were the things, because I only knew him, I was telling him above, one of the memories of my grandfather was, when I was even younger than that, I wanted to see cartoons, and he demanded with that timer, I wanted to see the Tour de France, and he before asked me like, who was he rooting for? Coppi or Bartali? And he was rooting for Bartali, so when I did this piece, I understood why he was so adamant on wanting to watch the Tour de France, because that
We
was
just open a parenthesis. Gino Bartali was one of the legends of Italian cycling. We had a program dedicated to him here because a book in English came out recently. And Gino Bartali was proclaimed the righteous among nations because of the activities that he did in favor of Jewish and other people that were persecuted. And he was already so popular that he could cross the lines that were patrolled by Nazi soldiers and hide documents inside the frame of the bike.
Yeah.
And that he never talked about it. It was only much later when people that were saved thanks to him said it, that he was proclaimed. He was a very interesting character, very Florentine, very Toscanaccio, bad tempered.
So that's what the
great
Toscanaccio.
man, Gino Bartali. Other questions? Yes.
How much is fact and how much is fiction in this play?
The only thing that I do not know 100% is the Bartali part. Everything else, the
about
Bartali part, the cyclist part.
Oh, I see.
If he was the real one.
I find it very hard that the passport was thrown at Himmler. I find that incredible. And how would you get the passport back if you threw it?
Well, I mean, it's through as it just slapped through. It's like, take the I mean, the guy took it, was like, look at it, give it back to my grandfather, and he left. That was it, and then the rest.
So he tossed it instead of handing it.
Yeah. It's more of a
It was an action.
throw.
So you didn't throw it at Himmler personally?
No.
Oh yeah. No, it wasn't him. It wasn't him. There, like that, and about the
And the thing afterwards at the Japanese embassy,
Yeah.
that was a true thing?
Yeah. Now, the nice temper part too. I haven't met Himmler personally, so I don't know if my caricature of the character was accurate. But I imagine that the line was also from my grandfather's stories of the as a nice temper.
What he did to help the people to keep them in the church where they were protected, the mayor of that
we were
town
saying before.
wrote a letter
So,
to
yeah.
No, I'm sorry.
about thanking him for that.
In Rome, we know already that we are going to have the general commander. No, not the commander. The general of the Carabinieri forces is going to come to see the show because of that whole parenthesis with that Carabinieri too.
Of how he was saved by the Carabinieri.
Yeah.
So you don't know what happened to the carabinieri who let you escape?
His grandfather.
Yeah, exactly.
So read the character.
Yeah.
Because that was a very courageous thing to do, risk
Absolutely.
his life to save you.
Yeah, we have.
I think it's, it shows in the whole play, there was a lot of courage in the Italian people. During that time when they were being torn apart, there was tremendous courage and also the sense of what's right.
Yeah. Just out of that one feeling, that whole story came out to do what's.
Yeah, and especially the Carabinieri, there is a sort of a parallel police. There is the regular police, and then there is Carabinieri, sort of militarized police. But traditionally, they've always been very patriotic.
With the big hat.
Big hat, very also dramatic.
So
in
we
their
look for a
appearance.
picture of it just from that time, so
Yeah,
that we'd have that look.
But there are many examples, especially after the armistice, where they felt that their loyalty was more to the king, that at that point was sort of out of the scene than to Mussolini. And they were very, very reluctant to obey to the orders of the Germans, because they felt they didn't have any allegiance of their own to the Germans. So they had to play the game. But there are several occurrences in which
Yeah.
and one of them actually was proclaimed a saint a few years ago because Salvo d'Acquisto, a carabiniere, member of the Carabinieri Force, who did like an heroic act and saved people at the cost of his own life. Of course, that's an example, extraordinary example, but within the corps, the force of the Carabinieri, there were many that harbored these kind of feelings, like pro-Italian, nationalist but not fascist, definitely anti-German, and not inclined to cooperate with the Germans. Any other question?
I have one more question.
Yeah, please.
Why did they accuse your character of stealing the treasury from the embassy?
He got accused multiple times. The one time that he was accused by one of his comrades that he didn't see that coming was, in other words, it's like, you give us names, we let you go. So they gave my grandfather's name to explain this whole story, because in fact the money was then sent to the Austrian businessmen who invested it in that thing, and they were there though, and they couldn't collect them up until the war was completely over. So the money was nowhere to be found, and so he couldn't fully excuse himself, like he couldn't fully prove himself innocent. But every time he would go personally, even with the last time with money, and tell them the whole story, and that's when Italians recognized themselves as Italians before fascists. They were like, oh, you tricked the Nazis, we like you, go for it.
So do you know if the money was returned eventually?
Yeah, I think that there is also another letter from the Ministry of, which escaped me now. But we had the confirmation, a letter of the amount of money, which my father chose deliberately not to disclose. I'm still wondering why, but I mean,
But it wasn't only his grandfather, it was a whole group.
it was a whole group. He's one of
Who
the
wanted to
few
protect
ones
the money
alive.
from the Germans. So-
And, but yeah, so it did return the part that they took, returned, and they have a note for it, but I'm not sure. It's probably something because it's still a secret estate to a certain extent.
It's secret.
It's secret. To a certain extent, that's what that is. My father worked in politics, so I don't know if that's why he doesn't want to really disclose that much. But there is a letter that says that that portion of the money was returned back to Italy after the war. I think in 47, 48. It took some time, but yeah, that part.
Any other question?
I do have one.
Yeah.
So the Austrian businessman, I don't understand, because Austria was part of the Nazi empire, so.
Yeah, but he was a private businessman who could. It's like he ran into a sum of money. He invested it in some of his bonds and other forms of investments, and so then the money was there, was part of his wealth, but nobody knew that it was the Italian embassy money. So he just got a little wealthier, but he didn't declare it in the taxes report or anything, and so it just was like, I don't know, an old uncle of mine died and got me this money, and so I invested it, and so they were there up in the air in bonds and whatnot.
So he was living in Austria?
Yeah. The husband of the sister, because I forget which of the comrades was she the sister of. Not Marie, not Bianchi. Bianchi didn't make it. Bianchi, they got to work on. But yes, it's of someone else, and yeah, it went through. They had this way. I mean, fiscal stuff was harder to trace back then. I mean, it's still hard, but that's how they found this.
So what happened to the car in the ditch?
Oh, I think it just stayed there. It was gone for good because those cars, as beautiful as they are, did completely. They tore apart like nothing. It was that the car was gone.
Tin.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
Thank you very much again, Francesco and Janice. Congratulations.